Okay, it's now 12:05. So let's get into it. So as I said today, the webinar is on how to attract top performers. And I think that the actual title, which was given to me by my fantastic marketing support person, Stephanie, winning the war for talent, why traditional recruitment no longer works. Right. And so some of you may realize that I recently wrote my second book, which is called Winning the War for Talent, How to Attract and Retain Top Performers. Now, the reality is I don't think that there's a war for talent. So my title's a little bit provocative because I actually think there's just some people who are good at recruiting, and there's a lot of companies who aren't very good at recruiting. So rather than often what happens is a recruiter who is either an internal recruiter or an external recruiter will say to the employer, sorry, we haven't given you a good shortlist, but there's a war for talent. In my opinion, it just means that they haven't done their job properly because they're either lazy or incompetent or they have too much to do or whatever it is. So that book, Winning the War for Talent, anybody who's on the webinar today who would like to be sent a free copy of that book, all you need to do is email through your postal address and we will send you a copy of that book for free. I also have a book, my first book, which I wrote a second edition of last year. It's called Uncover the Hidden Job Market, and that book is written for the job seeker. So I now have essentially two books, one book for the job seeker and one for the hiring manager. The Uncover the Hidden Job Market, if you would like a free PDF version of that book, you just go to our website, arateexecutive.com.au, and there is a little section there and you can just fill it out. I think you put in your name and your email address, and we will email you a free PDF version of that book. If you want to buy a hard copy of the book, then you can do that through Amazon or, whoever the typical resellers are. But if you want a PDF version of the book, you can get one completely for free. That book came out last year. Winning the War for Talent came out this year. We're not yet really giving away free PDF versions of Winning the War for Talent because, as I'm sure you can imagine, writing a book is not an inexpensive exercise, and I'm hoping to at least recoup my cost of writing the book before we start giving them away for free. However, because you're here at the webinar, if you want a free copy as a way of saying thank you for attending, then feel free to send through your postal address. We'll send you a free copy. Okay, so Sanjay's already asked me a question. What will employer boards look for in potential CEOs? Does it change with different industries? So once again, this webinar is for employers. It is not for how to find a job. So if you're asking me the question as a candidate, how do I get a job? Then that's not what this webinar is. Okay. I run one webinar a month on how to find a job and one webinar a month on how to recruit. And today's webinar is on how to recruit. So by all means, Sanjay, please feel free to stay on this webinar, but I won't be talking today about how to find a job. In saying that, I will revert back to those questions and talk to them from the employer perspective a little later in the conversation. But firstly, let me create some context. So obviously, the fact that you're an attendee, you'd know my name is Richard Triggs, and I'm the managing partner or founder and CEO of Arete Executive, and we are an executive search firm, and we are retained by organisations to go out and recruit for them very specific talent. And typically we work from around the $150,000 salary mark, which is what I would call a mid-level technical leader, right through to CEO and board roles. Although I'm based in Brisbane, we work nationally. We work pretty much across all industries. One of the areas that we don't really recruit in is government, not because I don't want to, but because we have been, very busy working in both the listed and private space, as well as not-for-profits. So I've been doing this now for 20 odd years, 16 years in my own company, and in that time, without knowing the exact numbers, I would say I've probably placed upwards of 2,000 people into jobs, and I've also coached, similar kinds of numbers of people who are out looking for a new job on how to find a job. So that's my background. I started my career working in corporate, in sales and then operational management roles. I moved into recruitment in my early 30s. I'm actually turning 57 on Monday, which is a bit of a scary thought because, 57, I'm certainly not a spring chicken anymore. More worrying to me than the number 57, which I couldn't really care about, is that it's actually 40 years this year since I finished high school. And I don't know about the older people who are on this call, but I'm sure that, for me, it feels like, okay, I didn't finish school last year, but to think it's been 40 years since I finished school, holy mackerel, that's I can't even wrap my head around it. So we're having our 40th school year reunion this year, and I'm sure that will be lots of fun. And I imagine that a few beers will be drunk and lots of memories will be shared. Anyway, getting back to it. Okay, so one of the things to really realize is that over the last few years, the traditional put an ad on Seek or certainly put an ad in the paper, nobody does it anymore. But put an ad on Seek and pray that the right person applies, that kind of recruitment is pretty much dead. A lot of companies have employed internal recruitment teams, and that is a growing trend because of LinkedIn. So LinkedIn Recruiter allows recruiters to scour LinkedIn looking for people with particular keywords and skill sets and experience, etc. And so as a result, why would I put an ad on Seek and get 200 applications, of which 180 aren't qualified for the role, if I can just have my internal recruiter go on LinkedIn Recruiter and do a search and find 20 people and contact them directly and offer them the opportunity to be considered for the role. So businesses like Seek, which are still very prevalent, and we still use Seek. So I'm certainly not saying don't put ads on Seek anymore, but the reality is the only candidate pool that you're targeting or you're getting access to by advertising a role is what you call proactive job seekers. Now, proactive job seekers are looking for a reason. They might be unhappy, they might not be very competent, they might have been terminated or made redundant. They are not necessarily the best people for the job. The best people for the job are more often than not what we call passive job seekers. Passive job seeker meaning somebody's in a job, they're happy, they like their boss, they're relatively well paid, they are not actively looking for a job, but if the right job came across their table, they would potentially make application. In order to access those passive job seekers, you must headhunt. And the challenge is that for the majority of employers, if they're using in-house recruitment teams, their in-house recruitment teams can't headhunt. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that they have to disclose who they work for. So let's say Mary, the internal recruiter from Rio Tinto, reaches out to Bill, the target employee who works for BHP. He is immediately going to know that she works for Rio Tinto because he can see that on her LinkedIn profile. You may not want that person to know that. It could be that it's a very confidential role where somebody is in the role and they need to be terminated. And so you need to headhunt a replacement before you terminate. It may be that you don't want to be perceived as headhunting directly from your competitors because they're just going to turn around and do the same thing. It may be that it's a very new and strategic role and you don't want your competitors to know, your strategy. So in those instances, you have to headhunt. And then in other instances, it may be a very senior role or it may be a very rare skill set. And as a result, you need to headhunt those people. But Mary, who's the internal recruiter at Rio Tinto, can't hide who she works for. And so as a result, it's very hard to maintain confidentiality. The second thing is that often internal recruiters are working on upwards of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, in some cases even 60 vacancies. And so obviously, whilst headhunting is not hard, it is very time consuming. And so if you have internal recruiters who are working on a high volume of roles, then their capacity to headhunt is very limited. So my book, Uncover the Hidden, My book, Winning the War for Talent, is written for the employer so that they can recruit themselves. It's not an it's not an advertisement for you must use our account executive to recruit for you. The book is written because I believe that most organizations should be able to recruit most roles in their business themselves, but there will be times where they need to use headhunters. And there's an entire process involved in that, from employer branding to individual leadership branding to sourcing candidates, interviewing candidates, offering candidates, onboarding candidates. The book is very much a methodology, follow the bouncing ball way to successfully recruit yourselves rather than relying on third-party recruiters. But if you do need to use a third-party recruiter, then it's important that they are a headhunter. And fortunately now in the market, whilst headhunting used to be a very expensive exercise, there are now many recruiters in the market offering much more cost-effective solutions, including, of course, my business, Arate Executive, and you should make use of those. Okay, so the other thing that I just want to talk about in relation to this podcast today is that if you are advertising roles, it's important to understand that the person reading that ad is looking for what's in it for me. So if the ad is just a regurgitation of the position description and there's no compelling reason for somebody to apply, they won't. So writing ads is a skill. And I talk about it in my book, and I give multiple examples of how to write ads effectively. But you should be writing ads where a candidate who reads it can clearly understand what is the actual job and they're excited about applying for it. One of the growing trends, and I would say probably would be around 95% of internal recruiters and even more now external recruiters, they don't put their name and phone number on an ad. And so as a result, a good person who reads an ad who says, I might be interested in applying for that job, but before I apply, I'd like to learn some more information. What's the salary? Where is it located? How much travel is involved? How big is the team, etc., etc. If there's nobody that they can ring, they won't apply. So if your internal recruitment team or your external recruitment team are not putting their name and phone number on an ad, then you are significantly decreasing the quality of the pool of applicants that you have applying for your role. Okay, so before I go on with a bit more structured conversation, let's have a look at a bit of this conversation. Oh, Sanjay says, happy birthday. 57 is the new 30s. I wish, Sanjay, from a health point of view, my mind still thinks it's a 30-year-old, but my body is definitely telling me I'm a 57-year-old. So, you know, I'd love it if that was true. Let's hope that they invent a magic pill that I can take and suddenly I feel like a 30-year-old again. That would be absolutely awesome. Okay. Okay, so Sandra's asked the question, may I ask what employer boards look for in potential CEOs? Okay. Excuse me. Does it change with different industries? Now, once again, I'm going to answer this from the employer point of view rather than the employee point of view, because this is the employer webinar. Often when you are an employer and you are briefing your internal recruiter or external recruiter, you're giving them a list of things that you want. So let's say, for example, you're a coal mining company, you're ASX listed, and you say to your recruiter, internal or external, okay, I want somebody who's been a CFO for at least 10 years. They need to have worked for an ASX company. They need to have worked in the mining industry, and ideally they've worked for these mining companies. Most recruiters are what I call order takers. So they take that order, and because recruiters are lazy and stupid, they run an ad, they get 200 applicants, and then they think, well, you know, at least 10 of these people are CFOs from ASX listed coal mining companies. So I'm going to interview those, and the other 190 people, I'm going to send them a thanks but no thanks. Yet the reality is a lot of those people would have very strong transferable skills. So a good recruiter, so I'll give you an example. If I was given that brief, so the first thing I would say is, okay, you've said you want somebody with 10 years experience as a CFO. What if they've only had 6 years experience, but they're absolutely fantastic, can definitely hit the ground running? Would you consider them? Most of the times the employer says yes. Okay, so the reality is they don't need 10 years experience then, do they? They just need very good key achievements and transferable skills. If they've done 6 years, then they would be open for you to have a look at. So let's remove the 10-year requirement. Excuse me. The second thing is then I'd say, what are you actually wanting this person to achieve? And let's say they say we're an ASX business, so we need them to produce the appropriate quality financial reports to the board to meet our ASX requirements. And we also need to implement a new ERP system. So I might say to the client, well, on that basis, if they've done those things, but they aren't from a mining background, would you consider them? And they say, yes. And so I say, okay, well, let's remove mining. You might say mining is preferred. However, ASX experience and implementation of ERP is more highly valued. So what I'm trying to do is to get the client to be more open-minded about the kind of people that they will consider. Very few recruiters do that. Most recruiters, they're given their order list, and they only look for candidates who tick every box. And so really good candidates apply for jobs and they think I could do this job standing on my head. Number one, there's nobody's name or phone number on the ad that I can ring up and talk to about. And number two, I make application and I'm declined. Thank you, but no thank you. Because I don't tick the 10 years and mining experience. My apologies. I've obviously been talking too much today. So again, going back to Sanjay, may I ask what most employer boards look for in potential CEOs? What you'll find is that they will have their ideal wave of magic wand list, but a good recruiter who's a trusted advisor will be able to talk to them and get them to be more broad in terms of the kind of people that they're prepared to consider. Because a lot of the time, they will say things that they think are important, but when questioned, as I've just demonstrated, they realise very quickly, that those things are less important. I want somebody who's done it before, I've done it well, I'm motivated to do it again. I don't necessarily need them to have had 10 years experience as a CFO in a coal mining company. Okay, does it change with different industries? Again, it depends. I mean, if you are in an industry, let's say, for example, you're in the pharmaceutical industry, and you need a new CEO, it's going to be challenging to transition somebody who's been the CFO of a defense company or a manufacturing company who has no relevant experience into your industry. So typically what I would be encouraging employers to do is to be intelligently optimistic. Okay, if I want to recruit the new CEO of Boeing, do I need somebody who's worked in the aviation or aviation related industry? I probably do. So as a result, I'm not going to consider somebody who's been running a not-for-profit for disabled children. In other instances, they may be far more open-minded. So to give you an example, at the moment, we are recruiting a CEO for an industry association, and it is in the construction industry. And historically, they have always recruited CEOs who come from a construction background. However, through us now talking to them, they've said far more important than this person being a construction expert, because we have a board of construction experts. We want somebody who is an expert at running industry associations. And so the shortlist that we're delivering, quite a number of people on that shortlist have no construction experience at all, but they have tremendous experience at running industry associations. So, like most questions, I would say to your question, does it change with different industries? It depends. Some roles are too far of a stretch. Some roles are not much of a stretch at all. Okay, let's go back to some of the more formal presentation while we wait for some more questions to come in. Okay, so one of the things that you need to realise now is that candidates, prior to making an application, are going to do a lot more research on your organisation to determine whether you are an employer of choice for them. And that's going to include predominantly two things, potentially three. Number one, they're going to look at your website. Most companies' websites are very much geared towards selling their products and services to their clients. So they have beautiful pages and stories and photos and about why you should buy us. And yet most companies would say our greatest asset is our people. And yet if you look at their website, there is limited or no information about why you should come and work for us. So my recommendation for your company is that you have a proportion of your website dedicated to attracting people. That could be, firstly, clearly showing who your executive leadership team are, who they are, what their backgrounds are, what some of their key achievements are. You want to get people excited, especially younger people, excited because they think, if I join this business, these leaders will help me to develop to my full potential. And then if you have particular things about your workplace which are interesting and different, they would call it your unique selling proposition or your employer value proposition, you should talk about them. You know, if you have a strong diversity program, talk about it. If you offer a lot of workplace flexibility, talk about it. If you have people in your team who've achieved great things personally or professionally, talk about it. You might have your team, and last year you won the highest number of donations for the CEO Sleep Out, or for Movember, or for another charity. Talk about it. You might have a member of your team who just won a marathon or climbed Mount Everest. Talk about it. You want people to get excited about joining your company. Most websites don't put any attention on that. And yet, were you to do that, that would have a distinct advantage for you in attracting the right person. Secondly, the same thing applies for your LinkedIn profiles. So people want to work for somebody who's going to mentor and develop them to their full potential. Most people's LinkedIn profiles are literally a career summary. I worked at this role in this company for 3 years, and before that I worked for this company in this role for 5 years, and before that I worked for this company, and so on, but there's no detail. If you are an employer, why are you excellent? What have you achieved in your career that would make people excited about working for you? What have people who have worked for you achieved in their careers that would make other people want to work for you? There is a section in your LinkedIn profile where you can get recommendations, and you should be asking your staff to write you a recommendation as a boss. So somebody from my team might go, "Oh, Richard's a fantastic owner and manager of a recruitment company. He's been a joy to work for, and I've learned so much working for him." Obviously, I'm just making that up, although I'm sure that it's true. Right. Now, it's not just future employees that are looking at your LinkedIn profile. It's future employers, it's customers, it's suppliers, it's strategic partners, it's banks who are looking to lend you money, it's private equity. Everybody is looking at everybody's LinkedIn profiles. So your LinkedIn profile has to sell you as to why you are excellent. And in this context, it has to sell you on why you are an excellent manager or leader, so that somebody would want to come and work for you. Now, when I wrote my book, I think I looked at the LinkedIn profiles of the ASX top 20 CEOs, and I can't think of one that was actually well written in that regard. Most of them, in fact, were quite terrible, or they didn't have a LinkedIn profile at all. So if you realize that every prospective employee is going to be looking at your LinkedIn profile before they decide that they want to work for you, it makes good sense to have a LinkedIn profile that clearly articulates why you are an excellent leader. And the great thing about it is that it's free. You don't need to pay tens of thousands of dollars. Either you can do it yourself, or you can get a person from your marketing team and ask them to upgrade your LinkedIn profile on your behalf. Not often talked about, critically important, and I would highly recommend it. Okay, going back to any questions. No further questions at this stage. So I suppose for the people who are listening, for those who are interested in just typing in an answer to this question, what's your biggest frustration in terms of your current recruitment process? What I call, what is the pebble in your shoe? Are you finding it easy to attract and retain top people or not? And if you're not, what is the reason for that? What do you think is the block or the thing that you need to focus on to improve in order to get a better result? And so while I'm waiting for people to type in, their response to that, let's just give that a couple minutes. And what can we talk about in the meantime? How can I entertain you as you're thinking about that? Well, last night I went and saw a band called the Sex Pistols, which for people of my age would remember as probably, the seminal punk rock band of the 70s. They came out of England. They had a guy named Sid Vicious playing bass, who notoriously murdered his girlfriend. They had a lead singer named Johnny Rotten, and they were a crazy band. And I went and saw them play last night. They had a different singer who was 40 instead of 70, and he was absolutely fantastic. But what was really amusing was the audience was filled with old men and some women, but mainly men, in their late 50s to 70s, like me, who are all reliving their young punk years. And I didn't participate myself, but I watched these old guys in the mosh pit, going hard and thinking they were still 20, and then they would walk out past me, and I think that they were coming to a quick realization that I'm probably a bit too old to do this sort of behavior anymore. And in fact, one guy said to me, I'd love to go and mosh, except I'm worried about breaking my glasses. They cost too much money. And I said to him, even though I don't have my glasses on now, I said, me too. So we watched these old guys literally going crazy. And it was absolutely fantastic. And it was loads of fun. Right, now I've not had anybody who is attending this webinar put in any further questions or has made any comment about what the pebble in their shoe is. So on that basis, I think let's wrap it up early. It's 12:43. So thanks very much for attending. As I said, if you'd like a free copy of my book, please email through your mailing address, and we will send you through a hard copy of Winning the War for Talent. And if I can be of any assistance to you in terms of recruiting roles for your company, or just offering you advice about recruiting roles for your company, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you've attended this webinar, but you're more from a job seeker perspective rather than an employer perspective, then I would encourage you to come along to the next webinar for job seekers. And if you look at our events page on our website, you'll see when that date is. But other than that, have a fantastic afternoon, and it's nearly Easter, so enjoy your Easter. I'll be at Blues Fest. Music is my thing. So I'll be down there probably in the mud and the rain for 4 days, camping, which will be a bit yuck. Hopefully your Easter will be a bit more exciting than mine. But anyway, on that note, great to see you and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.